So with that said, Ashley, it's great to have you.
Thanks, James. And hi, everyone. I can't see you, but I know you're there. My name is Ashley Malone. Like James said, I'm a current Googler. Yes, we are part of the Xoogler community as well. And in case you're wondering, I am a product marketer for a number of products, but most notably Gmail. You've probably heard of it. And today we're going to be talking about interviews and hopefully how you can feel a lot more confident approaching them. I understand that it's kind of a timely moment to be talking about this because you guys are talking about interviews now. Some of you are maybe starting to have interviews. And so before we get started, two things. One, I'm a Zoom noob. I spend all day, every day on Google Meet, so please bear with me. But I do want to make this interactive. So the first question I have for you guys is, how many of you guys are freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors? If you could just put it into the chat, that'll help me get a sense of who I'm talking to. Oh, cool. We've got a lot of variety here. That's great to see. And so how many of you guys have had an interview already? Not like, for a high school job, maybe as part of the college admissions process, you had an interview or you've already interviewed for an internship? That's awesome. Okay, so hopefully I can still help you here and you don't feel like you're complete experts now that you've been interviewed already. What I find the most tricky part about interviewing is that the subject matter is you. And that kind of lends itself to give you a false sense of security or preparedness. Like you are you. Of course, you know you. Who would know you better than you? I feel like I'm being Dr. Seuss right now. But the reality is that most people actually don't know themselves as well as they think they do, and definitely don't spend enough time just on your regular day thinking about the kinds of questions you're going to be asked in an interview. And it's really important to kind of think about the picture of yourself that you want to paint, because you only have a limited amount of time. It's 30 minutes to an hour generally that you need to convince this other person to take a bet on you. And so that's what we're kind of going to be going through. And I think getting this right really matters. And I'm going to be talking about this a little bit more later, but an interview has the ability to change your life, right? It's getting that opportunity, it's getting a job, it's who your friends are going to be, it's who your mentors are going to be, where you're going to live potentially. People follow people across the country and the world for jobs, and interviews are the gates to jobs. So I clearly care a lot about this subject. I think it has the ability to unlock a ton in a given person's life. So I'm super excited to be here with you today. But before we get started, who even am I and what qualifications do I have to be helping you in this arena? Well, I've been on both sides of the interview table, both interviewer and interviewee, too many times to count. I'm also an alumni interviewer for my alma mater, Georgetown University. So I interview a lot of people your age or a little bit younger every year. But most impressive to you is probably this badge. That's my Googler badge. I haven't used it in months, but I am employed at Google, which of course has notoriously hard interviews and low acceptance rates. And just to kind of illustrate this point, I promise this is not a braggy thing, but does anyone know the acceptance rate for Harvard? Just offhand, try to like guess it into the chat. 15%? 5-ish? Closer. Okay, Rosie and Jennifer got the closest. So it used to be around 5.9, but nowadays it's closer to 5.2, which is nuts. For context, that's around 2,000 kids that are accepted out of 40,000 that apply every year. Now, what do you think it is for Google? Two%. Okay, you guys are pretty close. So I only had one data point from this that's publicly available. I don't have the data internally. But in 2016, over 1 million people applied and we hired about 13,000 people, which is a acceptance rate of 1.3%. What about Xoogler School? I don't know. That's a question for James. Maybe he can tell you how many of you guys were accepted. Okay, 0.0. So even more competitive than Google. Congrats, you guys. Give yourselves a pat on the back. So all this is to say, I must have done something right. And my goal today is to share with you what I think that was. So, okay, overview, preparation, execution. This is what we're going to be going over today. Just an overview of overviews and what they are, how you excel in them, what we're looking for as interviewers, and then how to prepare for an interview better than I prepared for this, which the importance of which I can't overstate. And then execution is really, it should be the easiest part. So, did that work? Did that work? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
That's great.
So I figured out a workaround. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's just talk about an interview and why we have them. How would you define it? If you want to just throw in your definitions. If you have them, just your idea of what you think an interview is. Getting to know the applicant. Anything else? Having a one-on-one, recruiter seeing if you're a good fit, two-way conversation. All these are great. So at its baseline, an interview is the primary way that a person or an organization formally evaluates your fit for a role. And that can be across any kind of role, right? So it can be the CEO of a company, it can be a babysitter for a family, it can be a student for a university. But really, it's just a way to gauge if someone can help you in a specific way, because that's why a role comes up, right? That's why someone puts out a role into the universe, is to get help in a specific way. In reality, it can feel a little bit like this, which, to be clear, it kind of is. So evaluative interviews is kind of what we're talking about here, where you are being evaluated and judged for your abilities, but that's only one kind. Does anybody know what the other kind of interview is? Some of you guys kind of hinted at it in your guesses. Any guesses? Technical, informal, kind of close. Discussion. So the other is called informational. Yes, cool. Okay, you guys got it. Informational interviews, instead of putting you in the hot seat, your goal is to just learn from a potential employer or organization, someone who has a job that you're interested in. And I'll say these are great to start having as soon as possible because they help you suss out what kind of jobs you're interested in. And I'd recommend that you poke around for connections with your friends or family to see if anyone has a job that you'd like to learn more about. Lots of people are super open to meeting with young people, to taking time out of their day to just teach you about what they do, and to be real, to talk about themselves. Most people have a hard time saying no to young people, so please use your youth to your advantage and start doing this early. There's no harm in reaching out just to learn. So if the goal from an organizational point of view is to, for an evaluative interview, assess someone's fit for a role, or for informational to help them just learn more about a role, pretty obvious that on the informational side, your goal should be just to learn. What do we think that our goal in an evaluative interview should be? Any ideas? I'll wait a second. What is your goal as a candidate in an evaluative interview? To appear as an excellent fit. Yep. Be successful. Yes. Prove you can do the job sometimes. All these are great answers. So the way I like to think about it, it's not the only way to think about it, but your job as a candidate is to just make a good impression, right? You want to, of course, illustrate your fit for the role, but you have a limited amount of time and there's only a certain degree that you can do that. You want to demonstrate just a good impression to whoever is talking to you. The tricky thing is, it is always a first impression, which adds a lot of pressure. So now we're going to talk about how do you make a good first impression. It's really through a combination of what and how. What are the attributes that you convey, and we'll go into depth as to what those are in a second. And then the how is the way in which you convey them, which we'll also go into depth on. So What are interviewers looking for? What is someone like me at either a Google or as part of Georgetown? What am I looking for? It's really three things. There's competence, character, and culture fit. Anything that any interviewer is looking for falls into these buckets. You can see example questions that speak to each underneath. Competence is really, are you smart? Can you do the things that we need you to do? And then character is really, are you a good person? Do I like you? Culture fit is where things start to get a little bit different. So competence and character are pretty much blanket the same, not the same, but they're things that every single organization is looking for. Can you do what I need you to do? And are you a good person? Culture fit is where it starts to get a little specific to the organization themselves. So some cultures care about taking initiative, about being creative, about being comfortable with ambiguity. You might recognize that as one that Google cares about. But culture fit is really something that they're trying to suss out for their purposes and their culture. Just to look at Google as an example to kind of show you guys how these map, there are 4 stated qualities that every single Google interviewer is looking for. And they fall into these 4 buckets of role-related knowledge, general cognitive ability, Googliness, and leadership. And these map really clearly to the 3 buckets I just laid out. So role-related knowledge is things that are specific to that job and your experience being able to bring to that job. General cognitive ability is, are you smart? Those 2 things both pair really easily to competence. Googliness is our ultimate culture fit thing, but it also speaks to kind of ethics and integrity and character. And if you're willing to help out others, be team oriented, that kind of thing. And then leadership is exclusively culture fit. Some companies don't look for leadership or care about that at all. So that's just a quick look into how those attributes map into a specific company like Google and what we look for. Now, how do you convey those attributes? Well, it boils down to what you say, how you say it, and what you don't say, but communicate nonetheless, which is body language. There was actually some research that was done by an author and professor of psychology at UCLA named Albert Mehrabian, who found that there are 3 key factors in how you receive. This is where this research came from, but it is skewed towards personal communication. So we're using that as kind of a baseline, but interviews is a little bit different. Real quick though, any thoughts as to which of these 3 has the biggest impact on how you're received? What you say, how you say it, or your body language? Go ahead and make your guesses. Body language, what you don't say, body language. You guys hit the nail on the head. It is indeed body language. So remember, this is again for personal communication. In interviews, what you say really does matter. So words would have definitely more of an impact than they do here. But the voice and tone you use and the body language that you have matters a lot too. We're going to go into a lot of detail about words because they do matter so much in an interview context, and preparing to say the right ones matters in an interview context. But I think this is also just an important framework to keep in mind so that you know how you come across can really put someone at ease anyways, even if you get the words wrong. And that's another way that we can make someone feel like you're making a good impression, is by putting them at ease. So that's the what and the how. There's one element that bridges the what and the how. That is both an attribute you want to convey and a way that you want to convey it. Does anyone have any guesses? As a hint, I think that it was originally marketed as one of the words of this workshop, in the title of this workshop. No guesses? All right, 3, 2, 1. It is confidence. Confidence is an attribute that you have that you want to convey to the interviewer, but it's also a way you can come across as you're talking to them. So at a macro level, what I was just kind of referring to, you make a good impression by putting the other person at ease, by making them feel relaxed, that of course you have all the traits that they're looking for, and of course you'd be a great choice. And the way you do that is by being at ease with yourself. And that's really what confidence is. It's not a big ego or thinking that you have it all figured out. It's not knowing every single answer. It's being comfortable with where you are right now. right? Like with your experience, your strength, your skills, who you are with the person right now, because all of us are works in progress. And I will just say, I had a pretty good example just now of me completely screwing up this Zoom thing. And hopefully, you know, that's my experience. I don't use Zoom, right? Where's the line between being confident and cocky? That's a good question. So we're going to go over kind of like body language and posture. I'm actually going to save that because I do go into that into detail when we get to execution. I think it's a mindset. Confidence is belief in yourself and acceptance with yourself, but not believing you're infallible. And I think that when people start to get into cockiness, they think they're a little bit infallible. And that translates generally into a little bit of condescension towards the interviewer, which of course you never want. So that would be my answer, but we are going to go over it later. Okay, so that's kind of a just look into interviews and what we're looking for, and what we're kind of going to be going over today. But how do you feel confident? The way is through preparing. You are the subject matter, but you still need to do the homework. So that's what we're going to be going over now. And this is a large portion of what we're going to be spending our time on today. So speaking of time spent, how much time do you think you should be spending preparing for an interview? Just throw out your guesses or how long you spent maybe preparing for your last interview. 3 hours? 2 hours, a whole day. Is that 24 hours or like 16? I'm not quite sure. A couple hours. Until you feel ready. I like that answer. I'm going to go with that. So this is what most people do. They spend generally less than 2 hours preparing for an interview. That's why most people don't get the job or the internship. What you should do, this is just a reference that I use. It's not like, you know, golden, but is spend at least as long as you would for a final. An interview is far more consequential than any final you will take, because a final represents a portion of your grade for a single class, which accounts for a portion of your GPA. Whereas an interview, as I mentioned before, can legitimately change your life, right? So the way I like to think about it is if the interview is 30 minutes, an hour long, that should be at tops 10% of the entire work that you're putting in. So you guys know that iceberg metaphor. What the interviewer sees should be that 10% of the iceberg that they can see. Everything else is under there. The other 90% or more should be in preparation. I'm going to start to say this a lot now. Preparation is what builds confidence. How confident you feel walking into an interview is directly proportional to the amount you prepare. And I should add, it's entirely in your control. So how do you prepare for an interview? Well, the good news is you know the format. Now, there are technical interviews, and even for a job like mine that's not technical, I've had components that aren't strictly question and answer, where they ask me to do something on a whiteboard on the fly. But generally, it's 3 steps. There's questions, there's answers, and then you need to practice them. And I think a lot of people discount that last step of practicing because they are the material. Most people aren't good at telling their own story without some preparation. And an interview is purely an opportunity for you to explain yourselves, to tell your story, to tell your why in a clear, concise, and compelling manner. If I asked you, I'm not going to right this moment, but if I asked you to give me a 30-second pitch of you, how many people would feel confident doing that right now? Just 30-second pitch, tell me about you. Benjamin would? Cool, good for you. Anybody else? Yes or no? Would you feel comfortable? Oh, good. Okay, so you guys have a little bit of experience here, so maybe I'm coming into better prepared people. All this is to say, it takes a lot of effort to put together good answers and help make sure that you feel confident when you walk into the room. So first things first, this is pretty basic, but you create a list of questions that you anticipate being asked, and that's going to depend on the exact role you're going for, the exact company, and all of that. So you need to do your research, but these are the most common questions that I see. The last of which is more of a bucket of behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when is a really common format because it has you speak about actual experiences that you've had and give examples of them. So all of these questions you'll notice too will map to competence, character, and culture fit, those attributes that they're looking for. So remember to have that top of mind too. Now, there's a second part here. Anybody want to guess what we're missing as this list of questions we're putting down? This is kind of a trick question, but I'll see if any of you get it. Any ideas to what we're missing? Okay, yeah, this isn't fair. We're missing a list of questions that you want to ask. So you should never, oh, Iris got it. You never want to go into an interview without an idea of what you want to know too, because someone mentioned earlier, an interview is a two-way conversation. You should be evaluating them just as much as they're evaluating you, even though you may really want the job. Maybe you learn something that tells you don't, right? So it's important to have a good list of questions that you want to ask too, and this is where you do your research. You read up on the company, you go to Glassdoor, you talk to people you know who work there, and you look up the interviewer. One thing I always tried to do as an interviewee was see if there was any points of connection that I had with them that I could bring up, especially as an icebreaker in the beginning to kind of make that connection, maybe even get them to laugh, right? Because that puts them at ease. It helps to give a good impression. So now you've got your questions, both that you anticipate being asked and the ones that you want to ask. What is next? Putting together your answers. But before we do that, quick question. You guys were semi-recently in high school. Does anyone still read, does anyone's school still have them read Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits to Highly Effective People? Is that a familiar title to people? No? Oh, it's a classic. Okay. Okay, so maybe a few of you would know this, but these 7 habits, even if you don't want to read the whole book, at least just read like what the habits are. Does anyone who's read the book remember what number 2 is, the second habit? I'm really putting you on the spot here. It's okay to not know. Maybe Yara might be the only one who would know. So the second habit is beginning with the end in mind. And that is never more true than in an interview, because you really want to have very clearly what you want the interviewer to walk away thinking about you. And what that means is, what do you want them to think your strengths are, right? What do you want them to think that you are stellar at? For me, it tends to be empathy and creativity, which relate to my job as a marketer. But I also want them to walk away thinking I'm just really easy to talk to, easy to be around, AKA I'm going to be easy to work with. I will say likability is an underestimated factor in anyone's success. No one wants to work with or for jerks, but likability is generic. It should be fairly common. What are the things that make you unique? What are you amazing at? And what do you want the interviewer to walk away thinking about you? So this is the first thing we're going to practice. Please enjoy my dancing vegetables. But right now I'm just going to give you guys a few moments to kind of reflect on your top strengths. This will take a couple minutes, hopefully. So think about the things that you enjoy doing, that you excel at, that people have told you you're really good at. Generally, they come in 3 buckets. Knowledge-based are things like Python, or you can speak Spanish, or you know how to use Marketo. Right. And in my opinion, they're the least useful because they're not really broadly transferable, that they're for that specific thing. And you might not have many in that category quite yet, which is okay. You probably want to spend more of your energy on the second and third categories, transferable skills or strengths, and personal traits, because these are the kinds of strengths that you'd bring to any job, any role, any project, really any situation. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to reflect on this. If you want to, feel free to privately chat me if you have questions or want help. And then I'm going to see if there are any brave souls in a couple minutes who'd be willing to share. Okay, I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds more. All right, so and a couple of you reached out to me privately, one of which said that they would be willing to share. So not to put you on the spot because you volunteered for this, but Benjamin, do you want to talk a little bit about what you see as your strengths and kind of how you determined that those were your strengths?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry if it's kind of loud and you can't hear me. I apologize. So I wrote my three strengths down, and I'll give a quick brief update of each of them. So I said that I have an entrepreneurial mindset. I'm willing to challenge the norm, and I feel that I'm professional for my age. And so I'll start with the first one. I think that I've done a lot for myself in terms of finding problems and feeling confident in myself to go chase after them and achieve success or finding solutions. And I'm confident that that's a huge skill of mine, and I love doing it. It drives me. And I feel that it's something that a lot of people look for as well. My next one is challenging the norm. Whether I believe or not in a argument or a conversation or whatever that may look like, I always like to bring out maybe insight that other people haven't considered. And one great example of that was when I was in student government and we were approving money like we did every year. And the reason why we were approving the $5,000 for whatever was, well, they did it last year, so we're just going to do it again. And I agreed with us approving the money, but we had a long conversation, an hour and a half long conversation about just because they did it last year doesn't mean that's necessarily the best option for us this year. And then finally, in terms of professionalism, this is just something I know about myself. I love interacting with adults and professionals. I'm 18 years old, just graduated high school, and just find being professional a lot more fun than being childish.
So I can definitely add a piece of feedback where totally agree. You sound much more articulate than kids your age. Your first one brings up an interesting point though, entrepreneurial spirit. I think that has a lot of other names, right? Like taking initiative or liking to be a problem solver, things like that, which to me matters because what you say to describe that same skill set helps tell your story, right? If you're going for a job at a startup, saying entrepreneurial spirit might resonate better than saying taking initiative. So that's really interesting. And then to your second one, you kind of got ahead of me in going to an example of where that came out. So table that one for later, but for anyone else who found that interesting, it was a great example. And yeah, just put that one on pause because we're going to be going over that really quickly. But thank you so much for sharing, Benjamin. All right, so those are our strengths. So now hopefully we have an idea of what we want the interviewer to walk away thinking about us. Now let's talk about writing thoughtful answers. So there are certain traits that you want to embody in your answer and how you come across, and traits that you want to avoid. If you were quick, you might have caught that I said it a few slides ago. Really, it is this idea of being clear, concise, and compelling versus vague, rambling, and bland. It is totally okay to pause, to have silences, to answer and stop talking. A lot of people are afraid of this like void in conversation, and silence is okay. So when you're writing your answers, you want to make sure that they're really, really crisp. And one thing that I just want to share kind of from a personal anecdote is I had a director at Google actually whose favorite saying was be brief, be bright, be gone. And that was really easy for me to remember. If it helps you too, this is what you're trying to do, is be brief, be bright, and then kind of be gone. But of course, leave a great impression in your wake. So now we're going to focus on another exercise. But first, an example about me and how I would answer the, all-encompassing question, tell me about yourself. And try to notice the clear, concise, and compelling. Hopefully, maybe you guys can give me some feedback on my answer. My tell me about yourself would be, I graduated from Georgetown's undergraduate school business in 2012, then spent a few years working from various startups before landing my first role at a more established company, Adobe. There I was PMM, product marketing manager, for both Document Cloud and Creative Cloud for Education before Google recruited me to work on Google Drive. I've since moved to Gmail, and outside of work, I love helping people demystify the interview process and build people's confidence, which is why I'm so excited to be here. Now, seriously, question for you guys. Did you feel like that was clear, concise, compelling? Do you feel like you have a better understanding of me as a person and kind of a little bit of my story arc? Yes, no, maybe so. You don't have to. Okay, good. I got at least one yes. All right, so now it's your turn to practice. The tell me about yourself question is it's a little specific because it's not necessarily going to feature a strength of yours. And in fact, if you were trying to put a strength into your elevator pitch, I might think that you were a bit of a robot. So let's make sure that when you're writing your tell me about yourself, it's just really focused on you as a human and your story arc. Think about things that an interviewer might find interesting or makes you unique. You can start with the basics of where you're from or where you were born. You can talk about any interests that you have, maybe subjects that really fascinate you, organizations that you work for, volunteer for, or even hobbies. What I find most important in this is connecting a thread of why throughout your answer. For instance, I just interviewed a student for Georgetown who's interested in politics. But if you dig a little bit deeper, the reason he's interested in politics is not just because his parents were poli-sci majors too, but it's because he's half Japanese and his grandparents were actually held at the internment camps in World War II. And he feels like a really strong desire for justice and that governing is the way that you can help accelerate justice. So that's what I'd kind of encourage you to do is connect it to as much as you can, this deeper why or something that's driving you because you want to be telling a story. Same deal. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes, maybe a little bit longer this time because it is asking you to write out stuff. Again, feel free to ping me with any questions you have. All right, I'm going to give you guys about another minute. Okay, now is the real test. Who is brave enough to maybe share what they wrote? Anybody? It'd be a great learning opportunity to get feedback from a group of people and, you know, resident expert. Rosie. All right, Benjamin, appreciate your participation, prowess, but let's go with Rosie. So thank you so much for volunteering. Let's hear what you wrote.
Okay, can I put it in the chat or should I read it?
Read it.
Oh, okay. So this was a very rough draft, so okay.
Of course.
So my name is Rosie Rothschild. I was born and raised in South Florida, and for as long as I can remember, I've been interested in math and science. Throughout high school, I worked on a math research project, and I began learning computer science, which led me to major in electrical engineering and computer science at Yale. I've always had a passion for community, so I've been heavily involved in student council since middle school and currently serve as a senator and deputy policy director in the Yale College Council. In my free time, I love playing and watching sports, especially soccer, and I love throwing pottery.
That's amazing. That's like what would go in a speaker bio if you were invited to speak at a conference. No, that's phenomenal. The one question I have as an interviewer is, what drove your interest in math and science? Is it like the clarity of the answers? Is it the problem solving? Like, if you could add a little bit of why there. You said as long as you've grown up, you've always loved it, but what draws you to it?
Yeah, no, I definitely can add that. Math and science has always just been a challenge and there's always more to learn. And I think that's like a really easy clause to put in there. So thank you for that feedback.
No, and to be clear, the rest of it was stellar. I just always personally love hearing about people's whys. And so the more that you can infuse that why into your answers, the better off you're going to be. People naturally like knowing why and like knowing the narrative behind something. And so the more you can give that answer to that question, you're not making the interviewer think for themselves about it, right? You want them to walk away thinking what you want them to think about you. So thank you again. That was amazing. Like I said, if I were writing your professional bio, I don't think I could do much better than that. Anybody else have any other feedback for Rosie other than awesome job? Levi, is that you raising your hand to give feedback? Yeah? Oh, I don't think we can hear you. That's okay. I had plenty of technical difficulties. Like, if anybody likes, oh, mic doesn't work today. Okay. Do you want to give your feedback via chat? I'll give you a second in case you're typing it out. I like that too. It kind of orients you to where she came from in the world and where her worldview was shaped. Awesome. Thank you for the feedback, Levi. And I totally agree. You guys don't know this about me, but I grew up in California and I grew up in the Bay Area actually, and that definitely influences me a lot. So great call out. All right. Hopefully that was useful. Now we're going to talk about the kinds of answers that require examples. So that was an example of just writing clear, concise, compelling answers. Now we're going to talk about when you need an example. Now, to be clear, not every question that you get asked will require an example. And in fact, if you answer every single question that you're given with an example, like I said, you might come across as a robot, which you definitely don't want. I think you guys have already heard of the STAR method. James, is that right? That you guys have kind of gone over the STAR method a little bit? Okay. This isn't necessarily a format you always have to follow. It's just a useful framework as you put together your answers. Situation, task, approach, or action, and results. Really just helpful to get started. So I wonder if it's worth going through this, James. Like, have you guys gone through this enough already, do you think?
I think it's definitely worth going through it, I would say. I think a few students have been through it, but we haven't really touched on it in full detail. So hearing your perspective would be awesome.
Yeah. Again, it's just a framework. If you try too hard to think about situation, okay, now what was my task? Now what was the action I took? It's going to make you come across as very staccato. So I'd encourage you to like write out what you want to write out, edit relentlessly, and then just try to make it feel conversational. A lot of students and just interviewees in general that I come across at Google make the mistake of being too verbose. We all have a natural tendency to do that, and especially to fill in spaces. But really try to focus in on exactly what was important about a given situation. So first, just kind of set the context, set the scene. What were you doing and why? Then what was your specific task? What were you kind of called to do? What was the challenge you were faced with? Then you talk about how you solved that problem or how you approached that challenge. And then what was the net impact or result? If you have any quantitative metrics, that's amazing, not necessary though. So again, like I just did before, I'm going to give you an example of me doing this. This was actually one of the questions I was asked at Google to get accepted to Google, because I had mentioned that creativity was something that I think makes me stand out as a marketer. And I'm not going to give the exact answer I gave then, because I have a swath of more examples so while being at Google. So this would be my example if an interviewer at a different company were to ask me this question today. Sure. So a big project for me this year was to launch the new integrated Gmail. As I was thinking of how to bring the product to life in a launch video, I had the insight that our product development process incorporates user feedback far more consistently than most companies do. So I use this as the basis for the concept, taking viewers behind the scenes to show them how we build products based on user needs. The video anchored the launch and helped make it a huge success, leading to over 100 positive press articles, 4 million in total engagement across platforms, and an 18% conversion rate on our splash page. So can you guys just see, as I walked through that, what was the situation, task, action, result? Is that clear? Yes. Now, more important question, when I read that out, did I sound robotic, or did I sound more conversational, informal? Okay, Levi's the only one giving me feedback. Thank you, Levi, and thank you, Lauren. That's what I try to do in interviews, is balance this, trying to make sure that you feel human and come across as human, but also make it really clear that you know what you're doing and you have the experience to meet whatever need the interviewer has. So that's what writing out thoughtful answers is all about. It's thinking really clearly about the strengths you want to make sure to get across, and then getting it across in a really clear, concise manner, sometimes using STAR when it's appropriate to have an example. All right. Now it is again your turn. I'm sensitive that we only have a few minutes left. James, keep me honest. Do we have to stop at noon?
No, if you don't have a hard stop, then you can keep going. And if people do have hard stops, they can leave. But I'm sure that there will be the majority will be able to stay a little bit later.
Okay. Keep me honest if you guys have to go, or if this isn't helpful. I'm going to give you probably a little bit less time on this, just so we have time for those that do have to leave to go through. Start to write out a thoughtful answer to one of the behavioral questions you're most likely to get, which is tell me about a time that you overcame a challenge or a setback. Situations that you can use can be school related, they can be extracurricular, or even interpersonal. I've given interpersonal examples in interviews. It's not a problem, especially if it's interpersonal, but also related to school or extracurricular. You can have issues with people, and a lot of the issues you face at work are issues with people. So take a couple of minutes to write down, and if it's helpful, you can use the situation, task, action, and result model. I'm gonna give you just 2 minutes, okay? But feel free to privately chat me if you have questions. Okay, I think it's been about 2 minutes. I'm sensitive to time, so I'm not going to offer the same opportunity to share and give feedback, but you guys will get my email address at the end of this. So if you want to share with me directly and I can help you workshop some things, we can even put it in a Google Doc and I can make suggestions and explain why, if that would be helpful. I genuinely love this stuff, so don't feel like you're imposing on me to send me your answers. I would really love to help workshop them if that would be helpful to you. So this is maybe my favorite slide because practice matters so much more than people give it credit for. And it's kind of fun because when it comes to practice, there's definitely a clear spectrum. So on the left, we have winging it, which is what most people do. No planning required. Just go in. Totally green, but you're fine. Then in the middle, we have some sort of basic structure where you generally know the points you want to get across, but don't necessarily have a specific way that you want to get them across. And then there's memorization, just having a script and trying as hard as you can to stick to it. Now, what's interesting is that memorization has its own hierarchy. On the left, there's just barely memorized, where you're probably going to make mistakes if you're nervous. Then there's the robotic recital, where you're so focused on getting the words exactly right that you come across like, you know, not human. And then on the right is my favorite. It's TED Talk memorized. And just for your guys' info, TED Talk actually has 2 tests to challenge yourself if you have it memorized to their level. One is recording yourself saying whatever you're saying and playing it back at 2 times speed. And then at the same time saying it out loud while staying ahead of the recording. So that's fun challenge number 1 for extreme memorization. And then the second is giving the talk while you're doing something else, like washing dishes or folding laundry or baking cake. But being able to do something manual with your hands while saying what you're trying to say is a great test for how well you have something memorized. And generally, the more sleeps you give yourself, the more you can memorize something. There's that conventional wisdom of don't practice till you get it right, practice till you can't get it wrong. Now, there are two places I think you can be on this spectrum. One is just a little bit more prepared than a basic structure, is having a clear sense of the points you want to hit, almost to a repeatable degree. And then the second is TED Talk level memorized. So there might be some answers that you want to be TED Talk level memorized and some that you want to have more of a basic structure. Feel free to combine those two, but those are the areas in terms of practice that you want to kind of be around. How do you do this? Record yourself. Practice with anybody that you have interaction with these days, whether that's your parents, your siblings, your friends. Watch yourself in the mirror. It's really disconcerting to like try to see your lips move and know that you're the one doing that and watching yourself in real time. It's also disconcerting to watch yourself, a recording of yourself. I just want to reiterate, the more sleeps you give yourself, the better it will be. When I was preparing for my Google interview, I did it over the course of a week, and I did a little bit at a time every day, and I enhanced how much I did. I increased how much I did every single day, so that by the time I was almost to the actual day of interviews, I had 6 sleeps between the first time I touched the material and when I was walking into the room. So don't feel like preparing a lot makes you like less than or weaker. In fact, it makes you stronger and more confident. All right. So we went over being clear, concise, and compelling and some of the answers that we're going to face and practicing that. But what about those how, the how you come across? So the next section is all about execution. So first things first, I always encourage people, just take a breath. Hopefully, if you've put in all the practice, you know your stuff, you know what you want to get across, you have solid examples of your biggest strengths and skills. Hopefully you've researched the company and the school a lot as part of that preparation. You know as much as you can about what to expect and you're prepared. Remember, preparation builds confidence. So give yourself a break. Now you just need to do the 10%, which is executing. So the first thing I like to remind people of is that you're interviewing not just in the interview itself, but every moment in which you interact with the recruiter or the interviewer. So what that means is don't screw up the small stuff. Everything from the first email to the follow-up contributes to the overall interview experience, and little things can make a difference. I can't tell you how many people I've had include typos in their emails to me, and I'm like, cool, if you're going to make a typo to me, you're going to make a typo to a client. Right? Why would I want you as part of my company? Or why do I think that you're detail-oriented enough to make it at Georgetown? Same thing with the first call. So these are just little tips across the way. Smiling. If you actually smile, even if you're on the phone, like a real phone, not a Zoom call, it makes you sound friendlier. It genuinely does. Little things like that. If you're actually getting a real in-person meeting, I don't know if those are going to happen in the next year, but if it does, be early, remember people's names, and just be polite to everyone, because people talk. And if you're not even mean, but ignorant of someone along the way, that'll probably get communicated. And then lastly, I think this is really important. Lots of people send thank yous. Few people make those thank yous really come alive by specifically touting a highlight for them. So make sure that as soon as you're done with the interview, you write down one big highlight and try to describe it as much detail as possible. Whether it's, I really liked that answer you gave about Google doing XYZ, or I really liked the commentary you gave after I shared this. Make sure that it feels personal and it's really specific. All right. So we went over this before, the what you say, how you say it, what you don't say, and we've gone over in depth what you say. We haven't as much gone into the how you say it and what you don't say, which together is more what conveys confidence than anything else. So this is really, and I think it was Benjamin that asked about the difference between confidence and cockiness. It's pie. There's one thing you remember about how you speak, how you come across, what you want to embody. It's being positive, it's being engaged, it's being interested. You want to come across as someone that's a little bit glass half full, that is a positive force to be around. You want to clearly be engaged with the interviewer and what they're saying, and also demonstrate a certain level of interest. And that comes through in your voice. It comes through in how you present yourself. On the right are also just qualities that I always try to embody. Everyone, when they're in a nerve-wracking situation, tends to speak quickly. So just make sure to give yourself a beat, and sometimes overcorrecting can net you in a better place. Coming across as more relaxed than tense. I might have been a little bit tense when I screwed up my presenting so thoroughly. But hopefully overall, this has been a generally relaxed presentation, and that's intentional. Like, I want you guys to feel relaxed and like this is a more approachable subject matter versus me like telling you exactly what you need to do or being nervous about how I'm coming across to you. And the last is just a really helpful mindset to reorient yourself in. A lot of people can come in and think, oh my God, what are they going to think about me? Am I going to be good enough? It's just nerve-wracking in general. Orient your mind around helping the other person. So for me right now, it's really clear that I'm trying to help you guys learn about interviewing, but you are also trying to help an interviewer understand more about you and if you're the right fit. So see it that way. You're helping this person determine if you're right or not, just as you're helping to understand if this organization is right for you. So those are the qualities to embody just in your speaking. Then we get into body language, and I'm glad I'm adding this on some fun GIFs. First, if we talk about interest level, there's a spectrum, right? On the left, it's kind of this, I couldn't care less. On the right, it's I care a little bit too much, kind of go from indifferent to desperation. Across all of these, you want to be a little bit more in the middle, right? So you want to come across as interested, but not desperate interested. Then on the confidence level, obviously on the left, we have a little bit of timid or antsy or nervous. And on the right is what Benjamin was referring to as this kind of cockiness. You never want to come across as to the interviewer that they could think that you think you're better than them. And then lastly, affability is really important. And this comes through more in your facial expression. On the left, clearly, we don't want any Spocks, as much as I love him. He just doesn't come across that he's the funnest to be around. And if I'm going to be spending potentially 8 hours a day with you, that really matters. But on the right, we have someone that comes across so nice, it almost seems fake. So again, you want to be in the Goldilocks kind of area for all of these. But that's as much as I have. I think that as James mentioned, posture is really important. And then I'll just summarize. So overall, interviews, your goal is to make a good impression by conveying key attributes that companies are looking for: competence, character, culture fit, and confidence, using what you say, how you say it, and what you don't say, but communicate nonetheless. Preparation, make sure to always think of the end and what you want them to walk away believing about you. Do your research, write out all of your answers that are clear, concise, and compelling, and then practice. And I'll just emphasize again there, you probably can edit yourself down more than you think you can. So don't be afraid to take a pen, a red pen to something and cut. And then lastly, at every touch point, what you say and how you say it matters. You should try to be positive, interested and engaged, and then also try to avoid extremes and be more on the steady, relaxed, and helpful side. And that is all I have for you. I'm so afraid to even try to stop sharing right now. Like, I haven't touched the interface at all, but let's see if that works. And I'm only 5 minutes over. So that's all I have for you.
Oh, thank you, Ashley. That was incredible. That was such a thorough presentation, and definitely I like the way you described like demystifying it. I feel like to me it's the process and like the thought behind it has been demystified. So I hyped up this presentation a lot this morning, and you blew my expectations out of the water. So thank you. This has been awesome.
I didn't go to my last slide, which had my email. I feel like I should type that to everybody now, because I seriously do mean, if you guys have questions, this is only successful if you guys feel like you got something out of it. So if you have follow-up questions or want to learn more, that's my actual personal email. So feel free to use it.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you want to see if anyone has questions, or do you want to wrap up?
Yeah,
and take
I can
questions by
stay
email?
for a little bit too, if you guys have questions live.
Awesome. Yeah, so I feel free to just sort of raise your hand, unmute if you do have a question.
So about what you were mentioning about the pie,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how would you avoid being, fast, tense, and timid during the interview, which is, almost always going to be stressful?
So preparing helps. The more familiarity you have with something, repetition literally puts you at ease. So the more you've repeated something, the more familiar you are with just practicing, that helps. I think breathing exercises, as silly as they are, because what you're talking about is baseline anxiety. So anything that works for fighting anxiety in general helps. The other thing that I always try to remind myself is my anxiety is always the greatest in the beginning. And once I actually start talking to a person, you get into natural routines of conversation where it gets a little bit easier. And then I'd say reorient it away from yourself, right? When you're anxious, you're thinking about how everything reflects on you and you're worried about you and kind of in this worldview. What I said about reorienting yourself towards helping the other person can really help, or even just being curious about the other person. So if I'm nervous about me, a great way for me to forget about me is to be really interested in you, right? And like, let me be curious about this interviewer and what's her story and where is she from and what's she got going and what's her day like today, right? So those are some strategies that I've used. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. Thanks.
Anything else? Anything that stuck out maybe as a particularly useful element that you're gonna remember? Star is great. Pie. If you take just one thing away, that'll be a success for me. That's good feedback, Lauren. Next time, maybe we can make sure that there's more time for those kind of exercises and the share outs as well. The TED Talk test. Yeah, I think that's pretty funny. It's so funny. I feel like everybody, the first time they do an interview, could really use like a coach, like literally walking them through the steps. And then once you get the hang of it, you get the hang of it, you know?
Actually, I just remembered my question. I'm super sorry.
Go for it.
Being a little late, but how does interviews like being online and like being on Zoom now like really affect the three things you're saying, especially because like body language isn't, I guess, like as noticeable, things like that.
Yeah, so there are two ways it's a little different. So you don't have a handshake and you don't have that sense of like, you know, full body presence, which means that it's more important for you to, I think, have good posture and make sure that you're framed well in your little box, you know. It's funny, I've actually been a part of events where the producers make a really big deal about how much headroom there is. Because if you're down like this, you naturally look smaller. Whereas if you're up like this, it's like, okay, that's a little weird. So things like that make a difference. The other thing I'd say is interrupting. It's just going to be natural for you to interrupt each other more because there's not as clear an indication of who's talking when. But what I will say is, I am super understanding of that as an interviewer in both contexts that I interview. And anyone who's not, that is information that you should use to gauge if you really want to work for or with that person yourself, right? So remember, like, even though they're evaluating you, you're also evaluating them. And those things should be expected. I also expect people to be nervous. So I account for that when they're talking to me, and any good interviewer does.
Got you. Thank you so much, Ashley.
No. Okay, wedding videos, yes. Sorry, Levi just asked, would it be awkward for me to mention during an interview that I watched that person's YouTube videos, even their wedding videos? Yeah, maybe don't mention the wedding video one because that's a little bit verges on creepy, but especially if there are professional things that they have out there. For instance, if you search me plus Google, you should be able to find product demos that I've done. And that's great because it means you've done your homework and it tells me you take the initiative, or as Benjamin says, you have the entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah. I think they would feel weird about that being brought up, but maybe they wouldn't. You can also gauge that when you talk to them, and even say, like, you know, I wasn't sure if I should bring this up, but as I was looking up like 4 things about you in a professional context, I couldn't help but notice that. And wow, what a beautiful place you guys got married. So it all depends on how you bring it up, right? So did that come across as less weird to you, Levi? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I think if you frame it right, but in general, you don't want to, I'd say, open an interview with that and say, oh, hey, nice to meet you. You know, I happened to see your wedding on YouTube, right? Like that would be a little bit too much. Cool. Any other questions I can help answer live? I'm also, again, happy to take things by email or help you workshop things by email.
I think if we're sort of set with questions, I think we can wrap up. Thank you for spending so much time putting this presentation together, sort of demystifying the whole process, and then covering this for 75 minutes with us. It's been awesome. So,
yeah.
Am I able to share that presentation with everyone in the section here?
Definitely.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad that we made it through the initial Zoom hurdle, and got out of the gates. Thank you for figuring it out. And
something was bound to happen. You know?
Yeah, there have been so many little glitches here and there. It's just a slight blip, but yeah, this has been awesome. I can't say enough. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for being an awesome, I guess, like workshop class is what I might call you. And yeah, you guys have my email. Always happy to help out if you need it.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think that'll wrap things up. Thanks everyone who's also watching on the YouTube. We have another interview-based workshop tomorrow. We'll actually have a couple of breakout rooms involved. So hopefully we can use what Ashley has taught us today and what we learned tomorrow and actually put it to practice in a couple of breakout room exercises during Irina's second Xoogler School event tomorrow at I think 11 a.m. again, Pacific. So with that said, I think I'll wrap up and everyone have a great rest of your Wednesday. Don't forget to fill out the feedback form. Bye.